Hey, y'all, welcome to season 2, episode 4 of the Peace Podcast. Just give me confrontation, whatever that looks like. And I know that topic might seem a little strange to be talking about because, we tend to shy away from confrontation, conflict. If you're anything like me, not everybody is this way. You tend to at all costs try to keep the peace, whatever that is. And that's just not a reality of life because there are things that are going to confront us and conflicts that we're going to have. And it makes me think of, have you ever been in like the grocery store and you look busted because you don't have any makeup on and you haven't done your hair that day and you just ran in to get a few things. And inevitably, you see somebody that you know on Facebook and you don't want to start a conversation. You don't really feel like talking and you definitely don't look like talking. And so you kind of just go in the aisle and you duck down. So I've done this before because as a teacher, if you go into the local Walmart of the place that or the town that you teach in, you're bound to see a student, a teacher, or some student's parent that you know. And I've gone into like the bread aisle and been like, okay, hopefully they don't see me because I'm not trying to like be rude, but I really am not in the place physically and mentally to have this conversation. And you think that if you just sit in that aisle and you duck it for long enough, that the person will just go away. And inevitably, you get home and you're like, oh, look, I have a message on Facebook and it's that person. Or I have an email in my inbox at school and it's that parent. And so you didn't necessarily duck the confrontation or duck the interaction. You just like prolonged it and made it happen in a different space. And don't we do that with things that we're trying to confront in our life? We think that if we duck the person or if we duck the feelings, that we won't have to deal with it. It'll just go away. And the reality is that's just not true. I remember having this conversation just a couple of weeks ago about, eating disorder thoughts. And body image dysmorphia, and I was telling someone that I haven't had a full length mirror in I can't even tell you how long. My kids have them, but I don't have them in my room. And part of the reason is because some of those eating disorder thoughts will resurface if you're standing in front of the mirror picking yourself apart. And so the root of part of that is the negative self-talk, the dialogue you have about yourself, and just the criticism that you'll give to yourself that you would never give to another person. And because I haven't quite dealt with that fully yet, learning to and getting there, but haven't quite, I know that standing in front of that mirror is going to do the same thing. But ducking that mirror hasn't gotten rid of the root of that problem. And avoiding looking at myself in a full length mirror is never going to take away what's really under there, those feelings that really exist under there. And that's just true of all of the things that we think that we're dealing with, but we're actually avoiding them because avoidance is not healing. So when you think about things that you've done in the name of healing, are you actually doing those things as a means of healing? Or are you doing those things to avoid having to deal with what's underneath that you need to heal? And I'd like to also disclaimer this by saying that setting boundaries is not avoidance. Setting boundaries is a great way to start the healing process when you're a yes person and you're a people pleaser and there are people in your life who just take and take and take from you. That is not avoidance. It's setting a boundary with a person so that you can save yourself and savor your relationship. Going no contact is not avoiding. So if someone is being toxic, sending you toxic messages, or just being a person that you don't want in your life, going no contact is a way to, again, save yourself. It's not avoiding the concern because going no contact can start your process of healing because you're getting that toxicity out of your space. Setting boundaries can start your process of healing because you don't have that negativity in your space. So I just want to say that because I don't want you to misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm talking about those things that you're avoiding internally, those things that you're pretending don't exist externally and think that they're going to go away. It's much like a sore that happens on someone's body and then it eventually turns into an oozing wound that eventually turns into a staph infection or MRSA or whatever. And that happens because we avoid it. We say, it's fine, and it's not actually fine. We say, it's just a wound, but it's actually oozing underneath the surface and causing so much more pain and toxicity to our world. So, why do we need to confront those things? Well, because we're either going to stuff those emotions and they're going to present themselves in ways in our lives that we don't tend to connect or associate. So it might be illness, it might be stress that causes illness, it might be the inability to sit in spaces that are loud and being overstimulated. And all of those can be products of stuffing things, avoiding things, and not dealing with them because the thoughts in your head are so loud that you can't deal with what's going on outside of you. And so when you're confronting things, the first thing you really have to do is feel the feels, right? And so I know that that is such a difficult thing for us to do, especially if you're in a space where you're a parent, because my kid needs me right now, I can't cry. My kid needs me right now, I can't feel what I'm feeling. But I would advise you to go into a room when the kids are quiet or occupied and really sit with that feeling. I tend to do mine in the shower just because people try to get to me less when I'm in the shower, or locking the door to the bathroom because people tend to leave me alone when I'm in those spaces. And I just sit with the emotion. And when you're sitting with that emotion, you're not telling the emotion, you're right. And I'm going to go down this journey with you. But what you're saying is, there's a space for you here. Inviting the emotion into the room is going to help you to deal with the emotion. So when you're frustrated, even though you don't want to show those outward signs of anger, if you don't deal with the frustration, eventually you're going to explode, and those outward signs of anger are going to be magnified times 1,000 because you've been stuffing it for so long that it just grew into resentment and bitterness and all of these other things. So you have to invite that emotion in the room. You have to say, yep, I'm really frustrated with my body right now. I feel like I'm out of control of it right now. And it's okay to feel that way. I can still love me, but in this moment, have this feeling. Or I'm really feeling triggered by whatever this thing is. And I feel anger, but I feel like that anger is really just a mask for the hurt that I feel inside. And I'm going to sit with this because it's okay to feel that feeling. Doesn't again mean that you go down the pathway of this feeling and turn it into something that it's not. Don't allow it to be the culprit of you telling yourself a story that isn't real and doesn't really exist. Don't allow it to create a narrative, but invite it into the space so you can feel it and just sit with it. Don't make it feel like an unwanted guest. Don't make it feel like you're trying to get rid of it and get it out the door as fast as possible. Just sit with it. Okay, this emotion is here, it exists. Also, the second thing that you have to understand is that you're counteracting a narrative when you confront whatever you're trying to avoid. There is a narrative in your head that tells you that thing is true because that narrative has existed in your head for so long. So when you are avoiding the feeling that this family member is somebody that you need to go no contact with, what you're really doing is creating a narrative in your head that the things that the person is saying about you or the way that the person is treating you is true. And because you're unwilling to get that person out of your space, you're going to adopt that same narrative. And you're going to start to tell yourself that the things that that person makes you feel about yourself are true. But when you're actually confronting that narrative, you're saying, that's a story that I'm telling myself, but what's really true? And oftentimes, what's really true is a very small extraction of the thing, right? And so, For instance, if we're talking about that body image thing again, you could look in the mirror and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so fat. I'm never going to get to a healthy space. I'm never going to look the way I want to look. And there's this whole narrative, this story that you're telling yourself. Or you could look in the mirror and say, you know what? I don't really love this thing. And I'm going to be able to work on that by scheduling this gym session every day or every other day or whatever it is. You could be dealing with feelings of inadequacy, and you could believe the narrative or create the narrative that I'm not good at this thing, I'm never going to be good at this thing, and therefore that disqualifies me. Or you could discount that story you're telling yourself and you could say, all right, I don't feel like I'm good at this thing. So how can I change that and get better? That's it. You don't feel like you're good at this thing. And there's something you can do to get yourself out of it. When you turn that narrative into a story that you convince yourself is true, what you're really doing is turning yourself into the victim of the situation as opposed to controlling the situation. And then the last part of that is that you have to rewrite the script. So this is really rewiring your brain for more, for abundance, rewiring your brain to stop thinking that because they're family, you have to do X, Y, and Z for them and because of them. Rewiring your brain that if you have a bad eating day, that all of a sudden that makes you bad. Rewiring your brain that if you're thin enough, then people will see that you're in control of your life. Those are narratives that you have spoken to yourself for so long that you believe them to be true. We have to rewire them. Otherwise, they're going to keep showing up and coming up. Because we've suppressed them and pushed them down and we've not wanted to confront those feelings, we continue to evolve into this person that can either pretend like the feelings don't exist or stuff them enough so that nobody else sees them, but we live in a whole haunted house. And if you haven't watched that episode, I'm going to link it so that you can at the end of this. But it's this whole haunted house that we've created in our brain of all of these narratives and stories that aren't true. And we've allowed our neuro pathways to take us to that space every single time we're in the same circumstance. And none of those narratives are true. And so one of the things that I've used to rewire my brain is when I start to speak the narrative of the past, the narrative of the person that I no longer wish to be, I'll change it. I'll flip it over. I'll say, okay, so a story I'm telling myself is this, but the truth is this, and I'm going to choose to believe this. A story that I've told myself in the past that you're never going to be the type of parent that you want to be. But that's not true. That's just me knowing that in the past, the examples that I've seen and the examples that I have in front of me currently might not be the way that I want to parent, but it doesn't mean that I'm never going to be the parent that I want to be. It just means that I might have to do some research and find new ways to do it. So instead of saying, I'll never be the parent I want to be, I switch it to, I'm not the parent that I want to be yet. And here's some things that I'm willing to learn or do to become that person. So I really encourage you to stop avoiding confrontation and thinking that it's bringing you peace, because avoiding confrontation that needs to be had is really just creating more chaos inside of you, even though there's this facade of peace on the outside. God calls us to latch onto his peace, and he calls us to be people of peace. And the only way that we can do that is to throw out those negative experiences that we've had, throw out those negative narratives that we believe to be true, and take control of our thoughts by giving him the authority over them, by allowing him to replace them with his peace. And so today, I just encourage you, think about those things that you've been avoiding. Really delve deep into that, because oftentimes we think, well, there's nothing that I'm avoiding, but that feeling you get in the pit of your stomach, or that feeling you keep going back to, shame and guilt are usually those. Those are some things that you're covering up and avoiding instead of confronting. So I encourage you to figure out what they are, to really feel the feelings that are associated with them, but unearth where they came from, and counteract them with a new narrative by writing that new script. You will never heal things that you're not willing to confront. You will never heal things that you continue to stuff down. You will never heal things that you continue to act as if they're not there. Okay. And so I just encourage you to do that today, because I'm telling you that it'll unearth a whole slew of ways that you can go into your healing journey. And if you are someone who's searching for peace, someone who wants peace inside of their healing journey, I'm going to link a free PDF that is a checklist for how to find peace if you're in the midst of chaos. And it doesn't matter what that chaos looks like. This is a universal truth and a universal checklist. Also, thanks again for following me. Thanks again for tuning in every Monday. I would encourage you and love if you would to leave a review, to subscribe to the podcast, either on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I appreciate all of you who are followers on social media. If you're not, go ahead and head over to my Instagram and Facebook accounts and like those. Also, head on over to my website and click on the subscribe button so that you can get the blog that comes out every Wednesday and any goodies that are associated with the webpage. Again, I appreciate you, and I love that you guys continue to tune in and go through my journey with me and get the wisdom that I've gained throughout it. Don't forget to subscribe to this page and watch that video that I suggested before to look at the haunted house inside of you. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you next week.